In 1968, the Netherlands reclaimed a portion of the ocean for an industrial plant that never materialized. To the majority of observers, it remains merely vacant terrain. Yet, environmental scientist Frans Vera perceived a different potential. Initially, 32 bovines were introduced to the expanse. Subsequently, equines and cervids joined them, and abruptly, over a handful of years, the terrain commenced an independent revitalization. Uncommon avian species reappeared, marshlands broadened, and the zone earned recognition as a premier environmental preservation endeavor within Europe. However, this triumph surprisingly transformed into a snare. Wildlife numbers swelled, and during the frosty season, thousands perished from severe malnutrition and freezing temperatures. What previously appeared as an environmental paradise evolved into a massive ecological controversy for the Dutch nation. In 1968, the Dutch cleared a section of southern Flevoland. The ground was designated for manufacturing facilities. Financial conditions shifted more swiftly than the construction equipment could appear. The acreage remained unoccupied, and in a matter of years, it transformed into a wetland, boasting the most abundant avian variety nationwide. Dutch ecologist Frans Vera examined this terrain and perceived proof for a hypothesis that the majority of his peers deemed radical. The dominant perspective maintained that absent mankind, prehistoric Europe would have remained an uninterrupted woodland stretching from the Atlantic to the Urals, featuring foliage sealing the sky for thousands of kilometers. Vera questioned this assumption. He posited that substantial plant-eating creatures, ancient bovines, European bison, and untamed equines individually sculpted the terrain, hindering the timberland from sealing and forging a patchwork of meadows and thickets. Zero documentation supporting this concept was available. Consequently, Vera suggested a concept no individual had attempted on such a magnitude, aiming to artificially duplicate this dynamic and observe the outcome. Vera initiated his quest with a problematic query raised by botanical dust records. If the prehistoric woodlands of Europe functioned as an impenetrable sealed roof, how come sun-seeking oak and hazel manifest so plentifully within ancient earthen strata? An unknown force undeniably maintained the woodland's openness, and the sole contender for that function was massive grazing mammals. This represented more than just a theoretical speculation. Vera acquired a role within the State Forestry Service and dedicated years advocating for the concept to undergo practical evaluation. The forsaken, reclaimed tract of Oostvaardersplassen emerged as the perfect experimental location. Expansive, enclosed, unappropriated, lacking artificial nourishment provisions, devoid of natural hunters, the objective was discovering if the environment could establish a harmonious equilibrium independently. The entire sequence commenced with waterfowl. As greylag geese settled the forsaken tract prior to any mankind interference, Vera, alongside collaborating associates, observed how the fowls personally converted rush thickets into wading ponds, prompting diverse avian varieties to instantly populate these fresh zones. This visual study inspired the concept. Assuming waterfowl possessed the capability to independently mold the terrain, what impact could massive grazers achieve? Vera personally articulated the exact instance of shifting from visual study to hypothesis later on. The dominant consensus argued that stopping a meadow from transitioning back to woodland required livestock, while maintaining livestock necessitated agriculturalists to manage and nurture the herds. Vera confronted exactly this assumed reliance. The situation urged him to ponder, assuming tame bovines are capable of sustaining a meadow, what prevents untamed bovines from accomplishing identical results? The initial hurdle proved logistical, discovering creatures lacking human supervisors. Heck cattle avoided random selection. They represented a lineage German animal scientists engineered during the 1920s and 1930s, striving via reverse reproduction to resurrect the vanished ancient bovines. They demonstrated sufficient resilience to survive absent mankind's supervision. In 1983, 32 individuals relocated to the location. The subsequent 12 months, 18 conic equines from Poland joined the group. In 1992, 52 red deer hailing from Scotland and Central Europe entered the environment. The initial seasons demonstrated how the bovines and equines maintained the vegetation cropped for the waterfowl, yet completely ignored the elder shrubs progressively expanding alongside the marsh borders. The cervids entered the equation specifically to address this issue. They consume vegetation that bovines and equines outright reject. Every introduced animal type bridged a particular void overlooked by the former inhabitants. The conic equines reached the sanctuary originating from Polish agricultural estates where mankind managed their choices over thousands of years, deciding feeding times, resting spots, and social companions. Within the sanctuary, these choices reverted back to the creatures individually. Within a tame group, the guiding position traditionally belongs to the primary male. Inside the partially untamed conic groups, every dynamic alters completely. Group navigation relies on the most seasoned female. She understands the water locations, the windbreak positions, and the spots where vegetation endured the parched autumn. The primary male remains on the periphery, avoiding leadership, functioning instead as a protector, monitoring dangers and maintaining group cohesion. Disputes between males conclude lacking almost any bodily friction. A pair of males halt confronting one another, exhibit dominant stances, pace side by side, until one ultimately yields. The untamed environment provides zero tolerance for physical damage. An injured male becomes a perished male prior to the subsequent frosty season. As the equines reacquired instincts that hundreds of years of taming erased from their nature, an alternative transformation unfolded inside the sanctuary undetected. The cervids demonstrated flawless adaptation to the sanctuary's environment, featuring an expanded nutritional intake, a highly capable digestive system processing subpar vegetation, and consistent reproduction despite challenging seasons. Lacking wolves, the singular natural hunter controlling cervid numbers across this European region, and lacking any relocation avenues, every successive lineage merely stayed within the sanctuary bounds. By January 2015, the sanctuary contained roughly 250 bovines, alongside 1,200 equines. Cervids totaled 3,200. The sanctuary surpassed the environmental sustainability limit previously during 2008. However, lacking a restriction factor, the demographic failed to balance. It merely wavered, multiplying during temperate seasons and plummeting dramatically during freezing periods. The sanctuary, originating as a balanced trial amongst 3 animal types, was subtly morphing into a cervid nation. Consequently, the cervids predictably experienced the repercussions initially. Avian species absent from this specific Dutch region for many decades commenced settling within the marshlands. The zone earned acknowledgement as an internationally significant wetland during 1989. Researchers globally traveled to observe a sanctuary frequently likened to the African Serengeti, located merely a 60-minute journey from Amsterdam. The Heck bovines continued multiplying. This served as confirmation, yet it simultaneously functioned as a perilous snare. The frosty season of 2005 functioned as the preliminary chilly alert. Roughly 34% of the Heck bovines succumbed to severe malnutrition, marking the maximum casualty ratio the sanctuary witnessed until that moment. Press outlets circulated images and recordings of creatures fading away. Wardens struggled to euthanize them with sufficient speed to minimize their distress. The director of the Council for Animal Affairs labeled the sanctuary a harsh internment facility within a journalistic piece. Inside the Dutch Parliament, a representative debating the 2005 casualty spike articulated the stance destined to form the ideological battleground over the subsequent 10 years. The argument proposed allowing the environment to function independently, lacking interference, provided a biological balance ultimately materializes. The events unfolding the 12 months following the initial massive casualty wave remained completely unanticipated. On May 22, 2006, the Netherlands broadcasted updates the nation lacked throughout recent history. A duo of white-tailed eagles established a dwelling and nurtured offspring inside Oostvaardersplassen. The fowls arrived independently, lacking any repopulation initiative, merely discovering a location boasting ample sustenance. Notably, the sustenance comprised the remains of creatures succumbing to severe malnutrition that exact 12-month cycle. Researchers subsequently analyzing the occurrence verified how an organic body decaying on location serves purposes beyond simply nourishing fowls and foxes. It restores into the earth the essential minerals the creature gathered throughout its lifespan. Around the decaying spot, thicker and increasingly varied flora flourishes. Bugs arrive subsequently, and fowls pursue the bugs. The scenario the public viewed as absolute sorrow manifested concurrently as an engine producing fresh vitality. The dilemma stemmed from the absent balance. The situation merely cycled through fresh casualty spikes whenever the demographics expanded sufficiently to strike the territory's maximum capacity repeatedly. The administration requested a global committee of specialists for an evaluation. The board released a document during 2006 permitting the trial to proceed given specific parameters: increased refuge areas for the creatures alongside an analytical initiative. The suggestions received partial implementation. As the financial downturn of 2008 impacted financial reserves, strategies to enlarge the sanctuary, offering creatures expanded terrain for instinctive travel, faced cancellation due to excessive costs. In 2013, the non-fiction motion picture The New Wilderness, detailing Oostvaardersplassen premiered, securing acclaim as a premier Dutch cinematic production that 12 months. The feature presented citizens a vision of untamed ecosystems, a 60-minute journey from Amsterdam, captivating and theatrical, yet as time revealed, a few years later, partially lacking context. In December 2017, the count of massive grazers inside the sanctuary hit almost 5,300, representing 700 above the prior 12 months. Approximately a single creature per hectare of terrain, sufficient, observers assumed. The frosty season manifested as freezing and damp. The vegetation ceased developing quicker than standard expectations. Nearing the conclusion of the period, exceeding 3,000 creatures succumbed to severe malnutrition or faced culling by wardens aiming to spare them from extended distress. This equated to almost 60% of the sanctuary's total demographic. Railway travelers observed equine remains straight through their carriage glass. Images featuring severely undernourished creatures circulated across digital networking platforms quicker than any formal clarification could follow. In February 2018, an author identified as Cynthia Danvers visited the sanctuary. She witnessed a sight she remained unable to erase from memory. "I previously never observed such gaunt equines," she reminisced subsequently. "We noticed an abundance of perished creatures. It appeared unfathomable." Danvers initiated legal proceedings targeting the State Forestry Service alongside her associate Anna Meek van Straten. The litigation challenged not the concept of reintroducing untamed creatures into the environment, but rather the methodology executing that concept realistically. The disagreement stretched significantly past legal chambers and analytical debates. Vera personally faced public comparisons to a notorious 20th century dictator. He obtained severe personal menaces via correspondence. Hostile warnings even targeted his descending generation. Wardens and environmentalists managing the creatures routinely additionally faced hostile warnings for withholding nourishment from creatures that the fundamental foundation of the initiative prohibited them from nourishing. No faction involved in this clash viewed themselves as malicious. Every participant assumed they were defending the creatures against the opposing faction. Han Alf, an environmental science educator stationed at the University of Groningen, perceived within the clash not analytics battling tragedy, but mankind's assumptions battling creature physiology. Passing away happens whenever demographic expansion hits the boundary of what the terrain can sustain, he articulated. Would a person enact a prohibition on biology upon an isolated landmass? Alternative observers viewed the situation divergently. Dutch citizens familiar with equines functioning as companions failed to perceive an organic mechanism. They perceived an injustice executed by an institution possessing superior knowledge. No faction held absolute correctness. Neither faction held absolute inaccuracy. Formal data originating from the State Forestry Service, Staatsbosbeheer, covering the 5 months stretching from December 2016 until April 2017, document 2,684 red deer, 75 bovines, alongside equines perishing during one isolated period. This transpired the 12 months preceding the disastrous frosty season, spanning 2017 to 2018, that railway travelers observed, signifying massive casualty volumes lacked singular anomaly status. The cycle recurred. Flevoland Province formed a board guided by Peter van Heel, aiming to analyze the sanctuary's administrative strategy. The document emerged during April 2018, achieving implementation during July of that exact year. The board's determination proved unambiguous. The trial involving absolute non-interference concluded permanently. Instead of permitting nutritional availability to control creature quantities, the sanctuary transitioned toward proactive administration, utilizing static demographic goals, roughly 500 cervids, 210 heck bovines, alongside 550 conic equines. This metric represents under 1/10 regarding the 2017 zenith. The campaigners refused to halt their demonstrations. The litigation arrived at the Supreme Administrative Judicial Body inside the Netherlands, addressing commercial regulations, the Trade and Industry Appeals Tribunal. On September 7, 2021, the tribunal released an ultimate verdict. The tribunal stated the massive grazers inside Oostvaardersplassen exist within untamed conditions instead of remaining captured by mankind. Consequently, the regulations dictating agricultural livestock lack applicability regarding their situation. The State Forestry Service executes its obligation of guardianship regarding the creatures inside the parameters of legislation. The verdict verified what subordinate tribunals previously concluded, signifying that practically the sanctuary's administrative framework avoiding fundamental alterations owing to supplementary legal actions. Animal doctors currently routinely evaluate the health status of the creatures. Documents detailing these evaluations, logs concerning the physical wellness metric of every group, receive publication via the province utilizing a universally available format multiple instances monthly. This diverges from the trial Vera initiated. It represents a middle ground connecting his concept with Dutch civilization, a group declining to witness creatures perish adjacent to railway glass. The wetland sector within the sanctuary additionally experienced modified administration techniques. During autumn 2021, the aquatic measurement inside the sanctuary's most expansive aquatic zone dropped toward its minimum metric throughout the complete monitoring phase, causing a massive portion of the aquatic basin to surface, morphing into a transient sanctuary attracting traveling fowls seeking sustenance amidst minimal aquatic depth. The wetland flora acquired territory for expansion. Upon achieving the necessary dimension of rush thickets, the aquatic measurement faces elevation once more, constituting a governed loop rather than the unpredictability Vera originally intended. The inquiry failing to secure an ultimate resolution remained precisely this. Did the breakdown reside within Vera's concept inherently, or regarding the manner of its execution? The sanctuary required linking via a pathway connecting the Veluwe forest, permitting creatures to travel whenever nutritional resources within one location depleted entirely. That pathway remained unconstructed indefinitely. The financial downturn occurring in 2008 terminated the enlargement strategies. The enclosure stayed an enclosure, while 56 square kilometers demonstrated insufficient proportions to support its personal hypothesis, lacking disaster. A judicial standard actually exists highlighting this paradox. Following an interpretive memorandum linked to environmental safeguarding legislation, creatures inside an enclosed region classify as untamed, provided the region surpasses 5,000 hectares while offering adequate sustenance. Oostvaardersplassen measures roughly 5,600 hectares. The sanctuary marginally bypassed the boundary separating untamed ecosystems from a containment enclosure under legal scrutiny, avoiding a massive cushion instead prevailing strictly by a couple hundred hectares. This represents the nucleus regarding the paradox, exposed completely down to its most minute granular aspect. A similar equine possesses the capability to embody untamed status, possessing the privilege to perish from severe malnutrition, or captured status, possessing the privilege of safeguarding, relying entirely upon whatever flank of a barrier it currently occupies during any specific instance. Vera stays persuaded that massive malnutrition fatalities avoid representing a breakdown, functioning instead as an environmental engine that human populations simply lack familiarity viewing intimately. His detractors articulate alternative perspectives. An organic mechanism confined inside synthetic boundaries, lacking natural hunters, alongside lacking any avenue for departure, ceases functioning naturally. It simply appears authentic through visual recordings. Zero factions have surrendered. The sanctuary continues operating. Administration continuously navigates the equilibrium, separating interference from its total absence. The inquiry regarding the quantity of supervision allowable inside untamed environments prior to them losing untamed status remains unresolved, extending beyond solely the Netherlands. Currently, Oostvaardersplassen contains roughly 1,100 massive grazers, under 1/5 compared to the zenith preceding the disaster. Reduced vegetation faces consumption, while an increased volume possesses duration for maturation. The creatures, judging by the most recent medical animal evaluations, exhibit excellent physical wellness. Culling persists every frosty season, functioning as standard demographic administration, identical to every alternative environmental sanctuary inside the Netherlands. During autumn 2025, autonomous analysts originating from Wageningen University finalized an analytical review covering the sanctuary's complete administrative framework, mandated by the province. The verdict remained calculated, lacking victorious proclamations. The decrease concerning creature quantities, alongside the administration regulating aquatic measurements, produced a beneficial impact. However, insufficient duration has elapsed to declare conclusively that the sanctuary's ecosystem is authentically rebounding across an extended timeline. Years involving supplementary monitoring remain essential. This fails to provide the resolution either faction involved in the historical argument anticipated securing. Fails to validate Vera's concept, championing absolute non-interference. Fails to provide an ultimate verification that the detractors possessed absolute accuracy. The terrain salvaged from the ocean, aiming for industrial plants that never materialized, continuously remains verdant, featuring equines feeding exactly where manufacturing levels possessed intended placement. The waterfowl, initially settling the forsaken reclaimed tract during 1968, continuously revisit the location every 12 months. The phenomenon, initiating as an error concerning commercial strategy, morphed into a highly extended environmental trial within Europe, continually pending completion, continually experiencing monitoring, and continually lacking an ultimate resolution regarding the inquiry Vera articulated 50 years previously. Does untamed biology possess the capacity to discover its independent equilibrium, provided humans merely abandon it completely?